thank you all for being here. Mayor, it's great to see you. Congratulations to you. Mayor Jennings said that you would have big shoes to fill. No, he didn't say that, but it is always good to be back in Escambia County, and it's great to be in Brewton. I'm not going to, as I have done in the past when we have town meetings, I'm not going to make a long speech. I know that might be hard to believe that a politician's not going to talk for 20 or 30 minutes. I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to talk about what you're concerned about. And I'm here also to thank you for the privilege of working for you, the opportunity to represent you in the United States Congress. That said, I don't think I need to tell you that we need to be concerned about what's going on in Washington, in America, and around the world, because I think there's every reason, ample evidence out there that we got a lot of problems, a lot of challenges. Some of them are as old as time and others are relatively new, but we got a lot of challenges. And if you want to talk about the immigration legislation in the Congress or gun control or Common Core, this is day 3. By tomorrow night, when I wrap up in Gulf Shores, we will have done 14 town hall meetings. This is my vacation week. We'll have had 14 town hall meetings in all 6 First District counties. So I've already had a lot of questions come from people like you who are concerned about what's going on, and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. So while I don't really come with a national message per se, I do want to talk for just a minute before we go to your questions and your comments about something that I think is important, and it's something that we can have control over. A lot of what happens in Syria and in North Korea and Iran, that seems so far away from Brewton, Alabama. But something that's close to home and something that I think will affect us all is the future of our area, the future of our economy. And that's an announcement, a groundbreaking actually, that occurred just a few weeks ago when Airbus last year announced they were coming and just a few weeks ago allowed us to put a shovel in the soil of Brookley Field and turn it to open a new door of opportunity for South Alabama. Now, why I would talk about that is because I think it's going to have a direct impact on Brewton, Alabama, and on East Brewton, Alabama, and in Monroeville, Alabama, and in Jackson, Alabama, and in Atmore, Alabama. I think it will have an impact so far and so wide that we have an opportunity that is in front of us unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime. So you say, well, of course, you're going to say that because you worked on it and had a little bit to do with it maybe. But let me tell you why the last 20 years gives me reason to be so optimistic about the next few years. 20 years ago, our governor at the time was a guy named Jim Folsom Jr. His daddy had been governor back in the 1950s. And Governor Folsom actually got to office accidentally. He had been lieutenant governor. Governor Hunt, if you remember, was removed from office. And Governor Folsom, along with the state legislative leaders at the time, did something that a lot of people thought was crazy. He actually went out and led the effort to borrow $250 million in a bond issue to go out and encourage a company that was going to locate its first U.S. automotive plant somewhere in the 50 states. They looked at Virginia, they looked at North Carolina, they looked at South Carolina, looked all over. And finally, when Mercedes-Benz announced they were coming to Vance, Alabama, most people, unless you went to the University of Alabama, had never heard of Vance. It was a bedroom community, somewhere between Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. And there were a lot of people back then, if you remember, the leadership of Alabama at the time got panned. Governor Folsom actually got booed at an Alabama football game when the announcement was made because a lot of people said, that's crazy, we don't build automobiles here. And they've made car parts in Brewton for a long time. Frazier, if you'll get me a bottle of water, that would be great, please. And anyone else who wants one, too. But we didn't make cars, we made car parts, tires, and other things, bumpers. But we decided we were going to get all in and helped change Alabama's economy, an economy that was for years, decades, agriculture, timber, textile, and we wanted to expand it, diversify it. That decision 20 years ago and Mercedes' commitment to coming to Alabama helped lead the way for Honda to come, in Lincoln, for Toyota to come. Thank you so much. Got a little bronchitis, so I'm going to try to keep my throat dry. For Toyota to come, building truck engines, or every Toyota truck sold in America is made in Huntsville, Alabama. And for Hyundai to come. Go to Montgomery, right south of Montgomery is a little community called Hope Hull. And what changed then was we went from not making a single car to today we make, we're in the top 5 automotive states in the nation. And being in the top 5 means that there are 55,000 men and women, our friends and neighbors, who are working in an industry that has good wages and a good future. So you say, well, that's great. We don't build cars in Brewton or in Escambia County, and we don't. We, unfortunately, have never brought one of those big auto plants this far south, although there's a mega site not too far from here that would benefit this whole area. But Airbus, their decision to locate in Alabama, their first U.S. assembly line, their only U.S. assembly line, at Brookley Field. What does it mean? Well, two quick stories, and then we're going to talk about what you want to talk about of whatever importance. But if you fly on an airplane as much as I do, I live in Mobile with my family, my wife and I and our 2 kids. And as the mayor and others who come to see me, the bankers and some of our other friends who do come to Washington, you fly up 2 or 3 times a year. I go about 45 times every year. Leave Mobile, fly to Washington to work for you, come back home, usually every week. And when you fly on an Airbus A320, which is what they're going to be building in Mobile, there are 670,000 parts that make up that plane. 670,000 parts minus the engine and the landing gear, which takes it over 1 million. Now, will we have 1 million suppliers locate here? No. You can almost bet your money we won't. But we're going to have more suppliers come here, and the proof isn't, don't take my word for it, the proof is when Boeing, Airbus's rival, Airbus and Boeing are Alabama and Auburn. They're the 2 big guys in the world of large, wide-bodied, small-bodied, single-aisle airplanes in the world. And when Boeing chose to go to Charleston, South Carolina, just a few years ago, their goal was to be between 750 and 1,000 people. In less than 5 years, they're at close to 5,000. So all of those jobs will not be in Mobile, Alabama. I don't want them all in Mobile, and I know that's being televised, but I'll tell you why. The way that we make this as big as the automotive industry is not to cluster it all at Brookley Field. They'll get their share, and we'll work to help make that happen. But it's, as Alan McCarter, the chairman of Airbus, says, it's to build a halo effect, to create jobs as far away as Chattanooga or Atlanta, Panama City or New Orleans, that make this a regional, a national impact. And if that happens, ladies and gentlemen, that puts more of the spotlight on where it's based. And I believe with the leadership of your local government here, county government, working in partnership, I want to do everything I can as long as you give me the honor of working for you. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Brewton and Monroeville and Jackson and Atmore and Flomaton, we're going to leave no town behind. No child left behind a few years ago. There's going to be no town left behind. We may even try to do something in Pollard. But it's going to take a partnership. It took a partnership to get them, and it's going to take one to make it a reality. They're coming. The question is, are we going to sit back in 5 years and say, wow, we got 1,000 jobs in Airbus? Or are we going to look back and 5 years and say Airbus was the first seed that was planted, and today we've got 15,000 jobs in the region. That will be a game changer. So again, I can't thank you enough for coming. I want to talk about what you want to talk about, and clearly if there are issues of national or international concern you want to share with me, this is your chance to do it. If you'll just raise your hand, we'll give you the microphone and let you say anything you want to say. But I did want to give you that piece of good news, because if you're like me, sometimes I like to turn the TV off with all the bad news that's coming in the world. But there's some good news happening here at home, and we need to celebrate that whenever we can. Who wants to share a story, ask a question, or make a comment? Yes, ma'am, the young lady in the red.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Dr. Rosemary Watkins. I'm director of Alabama State University's Southern Normal campus here in Brewton. And of course, education is always on my mind, not just higher education, but K-12 and any type of professional development. I think as a country that all of us needs to be concerned, and this is an international issue, I would say. Education is important, not just here in Brewton, but for the country as a whole. And what I have noticed lately is the trending of looking more narrowly at education, looking at, well, this taxpayer isn't getting what they want, and let's give them something to take outside of public education. And well, this one doesn't see what they need. You know, and we're beginning to break it down into small increments and not looking at the big picture as a society. That as a society, what is it that we want for the populace? You know, I don't have a child in high school, but I'm not screaming, give me my tax dollars back. And I think that's important for us as a community and as a society. And I just wanted to get your take on that from the standpoint of not just K-12 education, but post-secondary and higher education, and as a national initiative, what we should be looking at to make sure that our populace is educated and competitive in the workforce from a global perspective.
Well, not only thank you for your question, but thanks for what you're doing to help educate and to help train. You know, we're not going to get Airbus to come to Alabama if we don't have a trained workforce or if we can't train them. And we're not going to get other companies that are going to want to come here if we don't show a full commitment, a true commitment to, as you say, not only K through 12, but the community college network we've got in Alabama, one outstanding one based here, and all of the schools of higher education in the state of Alabama. And we're blessed. We have some of the most outstanding universities in the world in this state. And a lot of people don't realize that. Sometimes we don't do enough to talk about the good things that are going on there. I also don't think that there's a person here that would be where they are today if it had not been for some teacher, even at the youngest of ages, that had helped them see their potential and realize that they could chase their dream and catch it. And you're looking at someone who's living proof of that. My daddy died when I was 13, and my mother remarried a gentleman. We moved from Camden in Wilcox County to Greenville in Butler County. It was a sea change of difference. Camden was a pretty small town. Wilcox County is historically one of the poorest counties in the nation, not just the state. Wonderful place to grow up. And we moved from the country to the city, because Greenville had the interstate. It was 30 miles away from Montgomery. It had Bates House of Turkey. When I moved there as a young boy in the 9th grade, I can honestly tell you that I didn't understand why I was trying to be taught that I needed to learn how to use good grammar and diagram a sentence and conjugate a verb. I thought that was the silliest stuff I'd ever heard. And so your congressman came mighty close to being a 9th grade dropout, but for a retired English teacher who saw some potential and took time to give me confidence that even though I didn't understand why I needed to do that 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 would be an important part of my future. So I know there have been bills in the state legislature. There's been a lot of discussion throughout the state of Alabama about legislation that the state has been dealing with that may more directly answer the question that you've raised. But I personally think that we all have a commitment, an obligation to make sure that our schools are the best that they can be, because our schools are preparing the future workers, they're preparing the future leaders, and they are giving us a chance to be competitively at an advantage in what Walt Disney said was a small world. Now, I also have a little bit of bias about the importance of higher education. Higher education is not for everyone. I mean, there are some people who, for whatever reason, when they graduate from high school, they may go into the workforce, they may go in the military, they may not be afforded the opportunity financially to go to Alabama State or Auburn or Tuskegee or Troy or the University of Alabama, Huntsville. I mean, that opportunity, that door may be closed to them. But if they are afforded that opportunity, and we've got to make sure everyone has an equal chance to have that opportunity, then I think that we've got to make sure that our universities are doing what they can do to help train those young minds and give those doors. And I'm also, and please don't think I'm bragging here, because I'm certainly not, but I have a personal interest in it because my sister a few months ago was named president of the University of Alabama. Now I know we've got some Auburn fans here, but that's a pretty big deal for the Bonner family to have the first woman president of a SEC school, any of the SEC schools, be my sister. Roll Tide or War Eagle. I mean, I think it's something that we can all celebrate. So if I didn't answer your question by saying, I understand you're right, we've got to make sure that we're doing something to build out a better education system, not to tear down one, then I don't think my sister would let me sit down at the Thanksgiving table. One of the challenges is how do we fund it along with the priorities we've got with so many other things: health care, help for people who are seniors, assistance for small businesses. We've got so many challenges out there, but I agree with you. And just when we were in Clark County in Jackson yesterday, a lady came to see me and she gave me a banner, a presentation from the children at the Coffeyville Head Start program. And it starts there. It doesn't, we can't wait until you're ready to go to college. We've got to make sure that we're preparing a table for the youngest of minds so that they see an opportunity that's as bright as the sun. So thank you for your question. Other questions?
Joe, I would like for you to comment a bit on the sequester. At the end of the year, there was actually a tax increase of about $660 billion, and then the sequester is only like $85 billion. The problem is that it's such a ham-handed way to do it. What can we do to give the agencies, like we did with the transportation, the air traffic controllers, the discretion on how to cut their budget rather than just across the board blanket cuts?
Well, it's a great question, and you're 1,000,000% right. The thought of sequestration, it's a crazy idea that you would just take a blunt hammer and you would just whack everybody in the head when you could give people some flexibility and you could make some surgical cuts, because there are places where we can cut government spending. There are places where we should cut government spending, and there are places where we must do it. But sequestration, as you know, came about when back in 2011, we were trying to get an agreement dealing with whether or not we were going to raise the debt ceiling. And one of the agreements is that in order to raise the debt ceiling, we would have a few things trigger in. Number one, we'd have a vote on a balanced budget amendment. I think it's one of the most important things we could do. I'm not a big fan of changing the Constitution willy-nilly, but I think if we could give the federal government the legal restraint of a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution that mandated that we had a balanced budget, that it would go a long way toward getting America back on a sound path. So we had that vote. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough votes to pass it in the House or the Senate, so we have to keep working on that. The other thing that was done, you remember, they created a super committee. The super committee of Democrats and Republicans and House and Senate members worked for several months to try to come up with those voluntary cuts, as you say, that would have made a difference in reducing the level of spending, but it would have done it without the blunt force of sequestration. Super committee failed. You know, in the last debate, during the last presidential election, President Obama said in the last debate, sequestration won't go into effect. There were many people, Democrats and Republicans, that not only didn't think it would go into effect, but they knew that if it went into effect, it would be devastating. The president was wrong. And of course, the president signed it into law. I mean, sequestration didn't happen some mysterious way. It went into effect because the House and Senate passed it, and the president signed it into law. So I'm going to try to answer your question by showing you a couple charts here. These are not my charts, it's from the Congressional Budget Office. And I'll hold it up so everyone can see it. But it talks about why do we have to get a handle on the spending that we're doing in this country. Last year, we spent $3.54 trillion. Now, for those of us who grew up in South Alabama, whether it's Monroeville or Camden or Brewton, that's a lot of money. In fact, in Camden, our calculators didn't even have that many zeros on them. But we spent $3.54 trillion. And so how did we spend it? Well, some of it, the biggest chunk of the pie, was for Social Security. You pay into Social Security. You want Social Security to be there to draw out when you're eligible for it. A large chunk went for Medicare. Medicaid, which is mostly federal money, but that's administered by the state, had about $251 billion. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. National defense, $670 billion, and then some other mandatory programs and non-defense mandatory discretionary programs added up to about $1.1 trillion. But last year, ladies and gentlemen, we spent $223 billion on interest. Now, think about that. Think about what we could do in education. Think about the investments we could make in our schools, in our technology networks. Think about what we could do in transportation to help improve our airports, our dams, our waterways. Most of the power plants and dams that were built in the 1950s and 60s have had Band-Aids put on them. They're in massive need of a big infusion of money, and we don't have it because we're spending $223 billion in the interest alone. So one of the problems with the debt is, the debt right now is at about $16.7 trillion. Think about that. If I had to give to the mayor, he probably has it to give to me, but if I could give to the mayor, if I had it to, $1 million a day for every day since Jesus Christ walked the earth, that doesn't get us to $1 trillion yet. And last year we spent $1 trillion that we didn't have. We borrowed it and we're paying interest on it. The problem is that we're not borrowing it just from ourselves. We're not borrowing it just from Treasury bonds and from Americans investing in America. 48% of the debt of this country is owned by foreign countries. Some of these countries are not necessarily our best friends. If you're going to borrow money, we've got some bankers in the room. If you're going to borrow money, you want to borrow from someone who's going to be supportive of you in good times and bad. So we've got a real challenge. So coming back to the question about sequestration, unfortunately, there's a real divide in Washington, D.C. about how do we fund our priorities, and yet how do we start making a list of what our true priorities are? How do we determine what they are? The divide really comes down to this. We can't pay down our debt. We can't begin the process of borrowing less money. We can't fund our priorities like we would like to unless we do one of two things. We either need to start spending a little bit less money, or we need to find new money. So now I'm going to ask you a question, and I've done this before when I've been in Brewton, but I get a different answer every time. How many people here in Brewton, Alabama, think that your taxes are not high enough? Not the person sitting next to you, but your taxes are not high enough, and you'd like me as your congressman to go back to Washington next week with the promise that I'm going to work to raise your taxes. This is where you raise your hand, because you don't think, we've got more revenue coming into Washington, D.C. this year, more money coming in than ever before in the history of the country. But how many here believe that your taxes are not high enough and you want to see your taxes go up?
I guess I'm arguing now because I don't have a problem with that.
Okay? Well, thank you for speaking up.
My problem comes when I look at this and I'm looking at, I want to know who the people are that we have in the priority. Is the priority the people that pay in, or is the priority the growing number of people that have to be supported but have not contributed? You know, that's the reason I guess I'm so up on educating everybody so they can become a contributing member. I don't care if you tell me I got to pay 5% more if it ensures that all the people around me are paying their fair share, because I want the country to be sustainable, you know, and I don't mind paying. If you seriously came to me and said, Dr. Watkins, I need you to pay more, as long as the priority there, when you say Medicaid, I will never qualify for Medicaid, but I'm paying for it. And there are others the same way. But I want to see those who are getting it be responsible and responsive to begin to pay. And when we talk about truly needy, that we redefine truly needy as well. That's just my point.
Dr. Watkins, I think that's a wonderful comment. But let me talk about some of the frustrations that I think people, even who share your sentiment, have, at least they tell me about. This week we've heard, I've had more questions about a news story that says that our government is encouraging people in Mexico to get food stamps. Anyone heard that? That our government is giving welfare to non-U.S. citizens. They're not paying. A few months ago, actually it was a little over a year and a half ago, the administration, remember we had welfare reform back in President Clinton was in office. President Clinton worked with the Republican Congress, Newt Gingrich was Speaker, to try to pass welfare reform. We have a great heart, and we're always among the first and most compassionate to help people who are truly in need, to not only have a safety net, but to have a chance to step on that ladder and to step up and to keep moving up. But what welfare reform did in the 1990s was said, look, if you're an able-bodied person, and we can help by investing in job training or education or even daycare for your children, we want to help you get a job so you'll be a productive member of society. It was a success. We brought people off the welfare rolls and we put them on the work rolls. It was a true American success story. A year and a half ago, the administration said, we don't think we should make people work while they're getting those benefits. Now, some people can't work. Some people physically can't work or mentally can't work. I think that was a step backward. I think we should be encouraging people, just like you say. But the free cell phones policy came out to help people get free cell phones. I don't have a free cell phone. I doubt you've got a free cell phone. And so the idea behind it wasn't a bad idea. Someone's looking at a cell phone, you look and see if it's free or not. The idea is not a bad idea. It's to try to help poor people who are on the lowest rung of the ladder, make sure that if they need to call 911 or they've got an emergency, a tornado comes, that they have a way to communicate. But part of the challenge we've got is we've got a lot of people right now who are drawing off the generosity of America. And I'm going to give you an example that's pretty near and dear to our heart. It's pretty close by. These two young boys that came here and that just a few days ago turned one of the great cities of America upside down and had people too scared to go out of their house. They came here because America welcomed them here. As we've done legal immigrants since the beginning of our time. And they came here to study. They came here, one, to become a United States citizen. Ironically, got his citizenship on 9/11. But we gave them a chance. They took the welfare that came with the fact that they were not financially able to do it on their own. They sold marijuana, they're saying now, which is a federal crime. They sold drugs, poisoning our children, our minds. And then something happened. I don't know what. Hopefully we'll find out, because one of them was captured, and so maybe we'll get the final story. But they took the gifts of America and they turned it into hatred for America, and they killed innocent people who were racing in a race. And that's not to say everybody who comes here as immigrants is going to do that. Most aren't. 99% aren't. But so that goes to the question. When I ask how many people would like to pay more taxes, I'll always have one or two people say I'm willing to pay more, but I want to make sure that it's invested in the right reasons. But the vast majority of the people, when given the chance, didn't raise their hands, because right now most people believe that they're already taxed pretty heavily. With property tax, with sales tax, with gasoline tax, with income tax. And most people, with the economy we've had the last 4 or 5 years, with the hurricanes we had, Ivan and Katrina, with the oil spill in 2010, most people feel pretty burdened, almost up to here. But most people also, just like you, say, I'll do my part and more to help other people. But like you said, but I want them to help themselves. But so we kind of digressed a little bit from Mr. Barnett's question, but the bottom line is that sequestration is a crazy idea, to take an axe and just bluntly hit some really good programs. But right now it's the only idea because we got two options. Some want to raise taxes with the promise that the federal government can spend it better than you can. And others believe that in order to start investing in priority programs, we're going to have to start borrowing less so we pay less in interest. And that's the challenge. And right now, Washington is about as divided on that as we can be, even though there are a lot of other issues. Guns, immigration. Talk about immigration. We've got 4 million people in this country who are here legally. They are here because they wanted to come here. They are here. They came the right way. And those 4 million people, some came to go to school. I'm sure you all have some students from other countries. I met a young man from Australia who is a student at the University of South Alabama. It's a long way from Melbourne to Mobile. But he came because he's on a tennis scholarship. He's getting a great education at USA. And he'll go back to Australia. I think he may even go on and be a doctor. But many people come here legally to be educated. And we should welcome that. Many people come here legally to work. The German steel mill, ThyssenKrupp, when they were bringing people over, they were bringing people from Germany to set up the mill like it had been in Europe. They came here to set it up, and then they went back home. My daughter has a good friend who was in her school in Mobile, and he'd been with her for 3 years in her class. And this past year, they went back to Germany because that was the agreement. They'd come for a while, they'd work, they'd go back. And then we have people who want to come here legally. I don't know if any of y'all have had the privilege, like I have, of going to a ceremony where you swear in a new citizen. I did it just last year in Mobile. We had about 38 people from all over the world who were renouncing their citizenship in Nicaragua and in Albania and in Russia because they wanted to be a U.S. citizen. But they came legally. And they've worked 7, 8, 10 years. They probably know more about American government than I do because they've studied it. And it's in their heart now. So that's not the problem. The problem is we've got 14 to 20 million people who are here illegally, who've come in under the border. Some brought drugs, some brought other bad things. And that's what we got to fix. And I don't think you fix it. And the people I've talked with who came here legally and became U.S. citizens, they're the ones who are most outraged at the thought that someone who came here illegally would go to the front of the line and get ahead of them while they've been waiting 5, 6, 7 years to get their citizenship. So that's a big issue that we're going to be tackling this spring back in Washington, D.C. I hope I answered your question. Yes, sir.
Can you comment on the issues that were involved with the hearings with the Public Service Commission and the gas companies and the power companies in Alabama? Can you comment on that, or?
Well, I'll comment on it. It's kind of like I know some of the concerns are really focused on state issues, and I'm going to now comment as a citizen, not as someone who participated in it. There are 3 people on the Public Service Commission, as you know, and it's my understanding the governor, the attorney general, and 2 of the 3 commissioners are pretty consistent in saying that they believe that the Public Service Commission is doing its job regulating not only the power company, but the gas company and the phone company, the public utilities, and that there are no real problems in that regulation. There's one member of the Public Service Commission who believes that there should be some type of outside audit done. Here's what I know to be true, and I'm speaking now as a citizen, not really even as your congressman. But many of the big economic development projects that we have in Alabama today, we wouldn't have if we didn't have the utilities working hand in hand with government to get them here. Mercedes came to Alabama 20 years ago, but Mercedes came because Alabama Power Company had an economic development team that worked underground, undercover, covertly at the time to help acquire the land. Because if the word had gotten out that Mercedes was coming, then the land prices would have gone through the roof and we very likely wouldn't have been able to afford it. I also know firsthand that in the case of ThyssenKrupp was offered, Alabama put, I believe, about $700 million of incentives. I might be a little off on that. But they put about 700, I promised you the rain would come. Alabama put about $750 million on the table to try to lure ThyssenKrupp. Louisiana put over $2 billion. But the ThyssenKrupp people told me that one of the reasons they came was because Alabama Power Company committed to having lower rates longer term so that they would be able to be successful. And speaking of ThyssenKrupp, I know there's been a lot in the news about them selling their interests here and not having the success early on that they had wanted. Someone is going to buy ThyssenKrupp, and they're going to get a bargain. They're going to be getting probably a 10 or a $12 billion mill that's going to be the most environmentally advanced in the world, not just in America, for a lot less money, and they're going to make a lot of money because some of what they're making goes to support that automotive industry we were talking about. So I'm trying to answer your question like this. Everybody would like to pay lower rates. Whether it's your cell phone bill, whether it's your power bill, everybody would like to pay lower. I think if you look at the national studies, Alabamians probably pay among the lowest rates for their utilities in the nation. The Public Service Commission is the right body in state government to look and see, are there inequities? And if so, what needs to be done to adjust them? Not Congress, that's the state. But I personally think that we're fortunate to have public utilities that are willing to invest in making these job opportunities available to us, because that brings new jobs in, that brings new revenue in, that allows us to support our schools, our hospitals. And so I'm not one, probably not a very smart politician to say this, I'm not one who just wants to beat up on the utilities. I think that there's a regulatory branch, they ought to look into it, but I don't think people ought to be constantly believing that there's a skunk behind the tree, because I think that these companies do a lot, I know they do a lot, to help bring a new day for Alabama. Yes, sir.
The ball that we've gotten, but I remember about 30 years ago when we started talking about federal spending in the billions. And I can remember telling my wife, if you say $1 billion quick enough, you don't realize what that is. Well, the government kept growing, because we used to talk, agencies got 100 million, and then we got into the billions. One of the biggest problems I think that we have in government spending is written up there on the top there, $1 trillion. Nobody has including anyone in Washington, has a clue what $1 trillion is. I handle a lot of money, and just handling small amounts relative. $1 million is a lot of money. Right now, that number breaks down 354. It's right at $10,000 million a day. We're taking in $6,000 million a day and borrowing $4,000 million a day. When you talk in those numbers, people, you can't talk in $1 trillion. You say that quick enough, you can spend $10 billion, and $10 billion is just $10,000 million. Just say it quick,
Well, you're right. We can't comprehend how much it is. But again, we can use history to put it in perspective. When Bill Clinton was president, everyone in this room, sometimes we have some younger students that might not remember President Clinton, but we remember President Clinton. It hadn't been that far removed. The debt of the nation was $5.4 trillion. $5.4 trillion. And at the time, that seemed like an unimaginable amount of money. It is. It is. We're now approaching 17 trillion. We've added $1 trillion a year for the last 4 years of new debt. So it goes to John's question about sequestration. Sequestration is not the way to do it, but we got to do something to slow it down. Because if you keep digging a hole and you think you're going to eventually dig yourself out of it, unless you wind up in China, I don't think that really works. You'll never dig out of it. And again, the thing that just is alarming to me is how much we're spending on interest. I mean, you have a credit card, you buy a car on a note or a house on note, we pay interest. Interest rates are pretty low right now. Thank goodness they're low. I remember when I bought my first house, I called my mother up. Interest rates were not so low then. We got a loan, a 30-year loan for 10.5%. And I called my mother. And I said, Mama, it ain't ever going to go any lower than this. She said, I don't know. That's mighty high. I said, Mama, please. And she helped us buy our first house. I didn't do it. My wife and I did it. Well, interest rates today are what? 3.5%?
15 years,
2.5%. I might need to talk with you after the meeting. So interest rates, thank goodness, are low, because if they were not, if we had the kind of inflation that we had in the 1970s and double-digit interest rates of, 15, 18%, 21%, I don't know that we could turn around. I think we can. I hope we can. But you are 1,000,000,000,000% right. We don't know how much $1 trillion is, and we talk about it as though we do. And when you think about the fact that we've got so much money coming in, more money coming in than we've ever had in the history of America. I asked the Secretary of the Treasury this last week. Jack Lew was President Obama's OMB director. Smart guy. He worked for President Clinton back when he was in office. And he was before the Appropriations Committee last week. I said, Mr. Secretary, I said, I am concerned that the House of Representatives, not the Senate, not the White House, but the House of Representatives, has cut our own budgets 20% in the last 2.5 years. 20%. Now, let me tell you quickly, I didn't tell him this, how that works is, I've had 3 members of my staff who've left, and we've not replaced them. The law allows us to have 22 people working for you. You pay their salary like you pay mine. We had 14. But when they left, we couldn't replace them because we cut the budgets voluntarily 20%. I said, Mr. Secretary, if we can cut our budgets 20%, why can't anyone in the executive branch cut your budgets 5%? Didn't get a very good answer. He said that this administration has cut funding more than any other administration in time. I said, well, Mr. Secretary, I want to be respectful. I'm a pretty respectful person. I said, Mr. Secretary, the Department of Commerce, according to the President's budget, that was 64 days late. The Department of Commerce is asking for a 34% increase. I said, the Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation, is asking for a 50% increase. Under the President's budget, Department of Education would get a 10% cut. Under the President's budget, the Department of Defense, that keeps us safe, is getting 0.5% increase. I wonder about our priorities as a nation. If we can give some departments a 50% increase and cut the Department of Education, that's our future, or the Department of Defense, that's our safety today, I wonder what kind of path we're going down. I said, are you telling me y'all can't cut 1 penny out of your department? He said, we're making cuts, but we're not making them enough to get us out of the red and back to the black. And again, this didn't happen just with this administration. It's just gotten worse than this administration. But we've been, President Washington left us with a little debt. Debt's not necessarily a bad thing, but uncontrollable debt that's unimaginable the amount, I think it's a dangerous thing. Look what's happened in Greece. Look what's happening in other countries around the world. I just don't think it's sustainable. Y'all have asked some great questions. Yes, ma'am.
I want to say thank you for any support that you can continue to give community bankers. As you know, this has been very challenging times for us, and we do appreciate your continued support as we do our best to interpret the regulations as they seem to change every day and offer great products and services to our customers. And just a side note, I'm a product of North Monroe County, and I'm very familiar with Camden.
Well, my wife's family's from Monroe County, so I was fortunate to be a kid from Wilcox County and marry a girl from Monroe County. Thank you for what you said. Our community banks didn't do anything to cause the financial collapse that our country experienced in 2007 and 2008, not one thing. there wasn't a community bank, an independent bank that is in this state that helped create the mess that we had. And as I've said before, when the community banks have come to see me, when the high school football program is going to print, the local banks are the first to put an ad in the football program. They're the first to give to the Chamber of Commerce, to the Red Cross blood drive, to the, you name it. And unfortunately, when Mrs. Pelosi was Speaker of the House and we passed Dodd-Frank, I voted against it. But Dodd-Frank was promised to fix all the problems that led to the financial collapse in 2008. It didn't. It's making it worse. And as you well know, and as others who know banking better than I do, that you're being basically put in a vice. You're having a gun put to your head by a federal regulator that you'll never have a chance to vote for or against. You might not even have a chance to look in the eye, who's saying, we know more about how you should loan money, which is what you know something about, than you do. And we're going to tell you who you can loan and can't loan to. And I would give anything if we didn't have the Consumer Financial Protection Board. I'd give anything if Dodd-Frank could be repealed. We could repeal it in the House, but again, the way it works, you pass something in the House, you pass it in the Senate, and you get it signed by the President to make it law. And that's not going to happen for the next 3 years. Certainly won't happen in the Senate for the next year. That might change next year. But I feel for the community bankers because there's no group that does more as a kind of an arm of the Chamber of Commerce to promote a community than you do. And yet you're having these regulators come in from Atlanta and Washington, D.C. and Memphis and other places and telling you what you can and can't do and giving you new regulations and requirements to do it. It's a very unfortunate situation. But thank you for your comment. One more question? Anybody? Usually when I do that, I end up regretting it, but I don't think I will in this case.
I don't have a question or just kind of a request. I'm Jim Searcy. I work in economic development down here kind of throughout the region. And I want to thank you for your efforts with Airbus. I think everybody, as delighted as we were, as excited as we were about Airbus, we were probably equally disappointed and devastated when the tanker project went to Boeing. So, and I think everybody was excited about the efforts and knew that there would be continued efforts, but I don't think anybody expected this Airbus, the project, to come to fruition so quickly. So thank you for your efforts on that and also on TK, because those are transforming projects in southwest Alabama that are going to pay dividends for decades down the road. That being said, if you look at economic development, especially in rural areas, a lot of times it's negatively impacted by a number of factors, but a lot of times it's transportation related. If you look at TK, they're located on Highway 43 and 65. If you look at the automotive industry, it's pretty good east-west corridors. You've got 20 and 65 running north and south and east and west. Honda and Mercedes are both located at that. Even Hyundai's on 85 and 65. And what I'd like to ask you to do, you've done a great job for us in the past, but continue to push to improve transportation. And that's something that's holding us back as far as economic development in southwest Alabama. The El Camino project, I know you're well familiar with that, and we appreciate your efforts on that, but just continue to support us and work with that. So thank you.
Well, Jim, thank you for what you do. Thanks for your question. It's a great way to close. Actually, if anyone was beaten up when we came in here, the mayor pulled me aside and he gave me a long list of projects, and transportation is at the top of it. But it really is important. You know, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with the increase, 50% increase in this budget environment. I think is unrealistic, but I wouldn't have a problem increasing investments in infrastructure because that's jobs, and that does open doors. That's why the stimulus bill to me was such a failure so soon after the new administration came into office, because it didn't put any money to speak of. It was minimal in infrastructure, in transportation. And the reason that I've supported the El Camino project as hard as I have is There's so many wonderful people in Monroeville, in Grove Hill, in Jackson, in Brewton, in Atmore, Evergreen. There's so many wonderful people who live in small towns, and if they don't have a good road network, then they won't have a chance to get some of these projects. But I give you my word, we will do everything we can to look for funding, because that is an investment in the future, just like this investment in education is. I think I'm right. I don't know if this is public or not, but it's my understanding that progress is being made on the El Camino corridor. I'll leave it at that. And in terms of what's going on here in Brewton, East Brewton, this side of Escambia County, we are working hard to make sure that the State Department of Transportation knows of needs and opportunities. And we'll work with the mayor and your county commission and other leaders to do everything we can to put that on their radar as well. So y'all have been mighty nice to come. I can't thank you enough. Is it still raining outside, Frazier? It is. All right, if you didn't bring an umbrella, Frazier will give you his coat. And if we can ever help you, please don't hesitate to call on us. Again, it's a true honor and privilege to represent you and to work for you. Thanks for your friendship. God bless you.